Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to welcome you this evening on behalf of the trustees of the Baltimore Council on Foreign Affairs to another of our evening programs. Our subject for this evening, of course, is the foreign policy of Yugoslavia, which students of American foreign affairs have viewed with a great deal of interest and curiosity for several decades. 4 decades ago, we were entranced by the phenomenon of a communist state proceeding with relations which were not unfavorable with the West and with the United States. And we've watched Yugoslavia as a member of the non-aligned group of nations project her leadership and her determination in that particular arena, which has led to interesting ties with the Arab world, to be sure, in the Middle East, and has presented an interesting situation, not always totally identical with the foreign policy and interests of the United States. As students of American foreign policy, it's fascinating to watch a state which has within its foreign policies a multitude of interests and pressures which are not always obviously symmetrical with our own. And for those reasons, I think we're most interested in discussing and listening to an authoritative presentation on that policy. Occasionally, interesting case studies emerge, which allow one to view those kind of general problems more sharply. In order to deal with the question of the foreign policy of Yugoslavia, we're honored, of course, to have as our guest their President Ambassador to the United States, who has held positions of responsibility within Yugoslavian government. He served as the Deputy Federal Foreign Minister. He has also served as Ambassador to Uganda. But of course, at present, he's the Ambassador to the United States. And because of our general interest in Yugoslavia and the particular circumstances of the moment, we're especially delighted to welcome His Excellency Miko Rakic, Ambassador of Yugoslavia to the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ladies and gentlemen, it's really a great pleasure and privilege to address this distinguished audience, a gathering of Baltimore Council for Foreign Relations. I'm familiar with the fact that Baltimore is one of oldest cities in this part of United States, as well as that is the most important industrial center in the East Coast. We Yugoslavs have recently become particularly bonded with your city since the export of Yugoslav small car, Yugo 55, you mentioned, coming to the United States to just through Baltimore port. This is one additional reason because of which I would like to familiarize you in few words with some aspect of Yugoslav foreign policy. Socialist Yugoslavia lies in strategically important area at the geographical crossroad between East and West, North and South. Yugoslavia has opted for unique political system of self-management, and it continues to develop its own brand of social and political organization based on broad participation of these people in democratic process of decision-making. Our non-aligned foreign policy, which you just mentioned, first of all reflects our internal system. Yugoslavia holds non-aligned international position, which implies full independence of blocs and superpowers, but at the same time, one active attitude toward all topical international issues. It also implies cooperation with all nations based on equality and common interest. Our national liberation war and revolution represented a liberation movement with far-reaching effects. Yugoslav support to liberation revolution, faster decolonization, and non-aligned policy has come into and still is in conflict with concept of bloc balance in the world. But we are aware of the fact that we have to live in this world, no matter how good or bad is it. And that is why we have been extending our efforts to bring peace and cooperation among peoples. Yugoslavia, with its unique model of social self-management system, and its non-aligned international policy, is a significant factor of stability and peace in the Balkans and in Europe. It's also a balancing factor in this divided world. The readiness of both United States and Soviet Union to accept us such as we are is a firm basis of our relation with two superpowers. This is why we appreciate very much the United States government understanding of our position, the independence, territorial integrity, unity of Yugoslavia, its non-aligned foreign policy, and its economic stabilization program. This is of great importance for our current relations. We know that our independence and freedom are our own concern, but friendly support is always welcome. After Tito's death, Yugoslavia has resolutely followed the policy of continuity. We do not want to change our determination, our path. The Yugoslavs love very much our freedom, our independence. So anyone who thinks that we made change after Tito's, our path, and to be closer to either one or other side is very wrong. Socialist Yugoslavia is an open country, extending a hand and friendship and cooperation to all who accept relations based on mutual interest, on the well-known principle of active, peaceful coexistence. I would say that we Yugoslavs and you Americans have a lot of in common. We are very similar. We have very similar historical development. We like frank dialogue. We are unconventional. We speak our mind. And we return friendship for friendship. That's, I feel very comfortable in Washington, I can tell you frankly. Our relation have been traditionally good. We established diplomatic relations 100 years ago. And such level of understanding between two countries of different political system is a great achievement. However, I think it's as well great commitment, especially for us, for new generation who are coming. We have had some ups and downs in our relation, in our history, but we always managed to overcome the difficulties. In all very important crossroads during the history, we were always in the same side, never in opposite bank. We should do our best to continue strengthening our ties and expanding our cooperation in every field, particularly where opportunity for cooperation are almost boundless for partners with imagination, good ideas, and courage. In the past few decades, the bilateral relations between Yugoslavia and the United States have been characterized by an open dialogue. This is a positive tradition established by President Tito of Yugoslavia and United States presidents. Tito visited United States 3 times. President of Yugoslav presidency, Mika Špiljak, was here on beginning last year. He had good discussion, good meeting with President Reagan. Our Prime Minister Milka Planic visited United States in May this year. She also had very fruitful talks with President Reagan, with other United States administration's officials. And as I mentioned, President Nixon, President Ford, and Carter, as well as Vice President Mondale and Bush visit Yugoslavia. I am sure that we will continue this tradition. Open and good dialogue on high and highest level is always opportunity to exchange view of all issues of common interest, including question in which we can have different view. It is very important experience that changes in both United States and the Yugoslav administration have not influenced this good tradition and our good relation. Both sides agree that our relations have been very good, but we are also aware that the fact is that they can never be that much developed that we do not need to improve them. But the atmosphere is important. Our bilateral relation today, in my opinion, is better than ever before. In atmosphere in which we can openly trust each other, not only in the issue of mutual interest, but also in those where our interests are differ. That's very important. In our overall relation, economic cooperation based on mutual interests hold a special position. Economic cooperation with the United States presents a very important component for our long-term program of economic efforts. We very much appreciate the support extended by the United States administration to our program of economic stabilization. Not going into details, let me say that we anticipate a further expansion of our trade relation, higher form of our economic cooperation, cooperation in third markets, in joint ventures cooperation particularly. We also want to see one expansion of our financial cooperation, not only being limited to debt servicing alone, but aid at stimulating our overall development efforts as integral part of our economic cooperation between two economies. That's why we have been working a multi-year rescheduling in our foreign debts, and we will sign a arrangement with Commercial Bank in November this year, and start negotiation with government on beginning of next year. And we, therefore, I can say that we are grateful for support which we get from United States government in the past, and we expect as well more support in and understanding in negotiation which we are going to have on beginning next year. Economic cooperation with the United States contributes to our goals aimed at increasing production, productivity, strengthening our export production. We bear in mind that the United States economy has been in transition from a classical industrial structure to a new technology. We agree with our American friends that herein lies a twofold opportunity for us, for both sides. On one hand, we could over a long period meet demand of the American market for some classical industrial products, small car, I mentioned just it, furniture, prefabricated housing, and so on. It's understood that we have to sell more to be able to buy more. On other hand, there is opportunity for us to follow the latest technological innovation through higher forms of industrial cooperation in third market, and particularly through joint ventures, I repeat again. As per change of our course last year, it amounting to over 1 billion in both directions. This is much beyond the offered opportunities, as well as beyond our needs. The Yugoslav export to United States, I'm talking about export in last year, amounted to $432 million, and it has increased about 25%. Import amounting to 620 million. In this way, a step ahead was made in reaching to exchange balance. We have still trade deficit with the United States. We are very rare country with trade deficit with the United States. You may, but our intention is to make balance. You may feel positive that, contrary to some other United States partners, we do not aim at making surplus in our relation with the United States, but at producing more export in order to be able to buy more. That's our aim. Regarding this year, trend is not, do not promise much. In the first months of Yugoslav export to the United States has declined for 5%, while import from the United States increased 23%. We hope that some arrangement, and particularly I would point out Yugo 55 export, would soon make a situation more favorable. I also have in mind export of our furniture and other goods, and mutual economic cooperation, tourism. I would like to mention that this summer we have more Americans as tourists in Yugoslavia than ever before, and last winter as well, after Olympic Games in Sarajevo. Sarajevo became very popular, and about 2,000-3,000 Americans spent winter holiday in Sarajevo. And we would like to welcome more American tourists. We know that this year about 6 Americans spent holiday in Europe, but about 200,000-300,000 only in Yugoslavia. We would like to welcome more American tourists in Yugoslavia. Let me also mention joint investment, to which in our further cooperation we attach exceptional significance. Recently we have changed some of the provision of legislation regulating joint ventures. The provisions are even more advantageous for our foreign partners. There is one increase, I would say, increased interest from United States partners in cooperating with Yugoslavia, and I would like to take this opportunity to invite business cycle from Baltimore to examine the possibility for undertaking attractive investment with Yugoslavia partners. Baltimore has a very important role in increasing the USA-Yugoslav trade, in my opinion, trade exchange, and economic cooperation in general. Let me say in conclusion that something about Yugo 55. I'm sure that most of you are interested in some details about import of our small car Yugo 55, which entered the United States through Baltimore port. I can openly say that this deal with the frame of our bilateral communication is useful not only because it increases Yugoslav export, but because it creates possibility for broader economic cooperation between two countries. The beginning is rather promising. The first shipment, about 500 cars, and second, about 1,000, have been sold in 24 hours, I was told by Brooklyn importer. We are convinced that some will happen with, the same will happen with about 6,000 contract cars for the next 12 months. Maybe some of you already seen Yugo 55. I have heard that the car is very economic and that the importer told me that they call it this car by name Yugo GV, where GV stands for Great Value. We would be very pleased if this deal would last long on the basis of mutual interest. We also wish it to be a joint venture. This would contribute to better satisfying the American buyers who is fond of to buy economic car, who is also fanatic when quality and design are concerned. People from Chrysler told me that American buyers are very fanatic about quality of car and about design, and that they suggest me to be careful when this question about our car, which we export to the United States. I believe this is correct. So it's a good idea for our producer. Ladies and gentlemen, today I have mostly spoken about our interests, our common interests. However, I must admit that I'm very pleased with increased interest of American business partners as well as with support extended by the United States administration, official support, particularly to develop higher form of economic cooperation, to improve cooperation in other fields. This morning I met Mr. Brown with our parliamentary delegation. By the way, this day I'm very busy. Our parliamentary delegation is now visiting Washington. They start this morning talk with our partners in the United States. This morning we met Mr. Brown, Deputy Minister of Commerce. We have very fruitful discussion about improving our trade relation. And you cannot hear. I'm sorry, I don't know what is wrong. So in conclusion, I can say that our relations are good, as I mentioned, better than ever before, stable and with good prospects. Thank you for your attention.
Well, Mr. Ambassador, we certainly thank you for that overview of Yugoslavian foreign policy, for your emphasis upon economic policy, and if we could have gotten a Yugo up here, we would have. The ambassador has agreed to answer questions until 10 minutes after 7. There are two questions which have been asked. The first is where is Mohammed Abbas? And secondly, why did the extradition treaty with the United States not work?
Yeah, I'm not very familiar with this extradition agreement, but it was a friendly gesture 100 years ago, in the beginning of this century, when we established diplomatic relations with the United States, and it's work. I wouldn't say that it doesn't work. It's work, but from time to time, as you see, we have some, it's necessary to have in mind our legal system, your legal system, when it's question about especially about extradition. Better to not go into details, but it's a question of sovereignty of your country and our country. So, particularly with this question about Abbas, you see, we appreciate very much United States anti-terrorist policy. We have a lot of common in this field. But you see, we have some different view when it's question about the national liberation movement in general. We have good relation with PLO. PLO in our interpretation, our policies, national liberation movement. We have diplomat relation with PLO. And that's why we as independent country, as member of non-alignment movement and country with with well support to all national liberation movement during the history, we find that we have to be very careful when it's question about some member of leadership of PLO, particularly because there is no clear information whether he belonged to kidnapper or belonged to people who try to stop all this criminal wars. We suffer as country, as Yugoslavia, suffer very much from some terrorist group, as you know. I can give you a lot of example in our history, even recent history. A few days ago, if you read paper, you'll find that killer of our ambassador 10 years ago in Sweden got amnesty. And our people are very sensitive to this question.
The question was whether the government of Yugoslavia, by its present positions, condones PLO terrorist activities.
Of course, even Yasser Arafat condemns terrorist activity in PLO. And we, Yugoslavia, of course, we condemn. One more explanation for you. Yugoslavia is open country, on crossroad, as I mentioned, between east and west, south and north, and a lot of, sometimes a lot of terrorists. Nobody can firmly control it, moving through Yugoslavia. We have very capable organization. A few days ago, our Interpol, our delegation for Interpol were here, and they decided to cooperate in future as well. Next assembly of World Interpol should held in Yugoslavia. But you see, we make very much, we differ very clear terrorist activity from national liberation activity. National liberation activity.
The question was whether failing to retain Mr. Abbas indicates that relations with the non-aligned countries, presumably, particularly in the Arab world, are more important than those with the United States.
No, as I mentioned, we have principal position in our relation with all other countries in the world. It's not a question always on question of our foreign position. Some extradition of our foreign citizens to other countries we can do only with the coordinates with our legal system and evaluation of all the relevant facts. That's very important. Thank you.
The question of the ambassador from Yugoslavia is whether there is a faction within his government which might like to side more with the Soviet Union rather than cooperate with the Western world.
We never say it. Yeah, you know our history very well. In 1948, we refused any pressure from Soviet Union. It was the Stalin period. We were only country in this part of the world who opposed very strongly to pressure from. But it is history. We have our own way. We have our policy, our way. I just mentioned we have self-management, internal system, non-aligned policy in the world. We are, even from point of United States strategy, we are a very important factor for stabilization in this part of the world. And we follow truly non-alignment policy. So, if question of Gilas, it's a long story about Gilas, but I can tell you that Yugoslavia is multinational society, multi-religious society. And we are passing now a period which you passed 100 years ago. We are building our federation as stable federation. And if somebody like Gilas advocate, for example, multi-party system in Yugoslavia on a religious basis, in my opinion, all objective means could lead to civil war in Yugoslavia. It's not possible to introduce what Gilas advocating. He mentioned that in Slovenia it's necessary to have one Slovenian political party, in Bosnia some Muslim party, in Serbia some liberal party, and in Croatia some Catholic party. So I can assure you that it's not possible to introduce in Yugoslavia. We passed revolution. We established unity between our nation with different language, different religions. We are now united, stable country, and we have to follow our policy to be united, stable, with this policy which we follow now. That's why our people don't appreciate very much what Gilas is talking about.
Yeah, two questions are you willing to condemn the shipjacking as a terrorist act? And if, indeed, Mr. Abbas masterminded it, should he be brought to justice?
If he is, I agree. We all generally agree. But it's necessary to have good evidence about it. He answered, as you read in your paper, he promised to come to the United States to explain what he was doing in all this. And the government of Italy has evidence about it. It's a question of Italian ship. And then let him go. But they threw this ball in our court. They sent him to Yugoslavia. Yes.
It's a fairly complicated question. But it presumes, it's based on the presumption that the extradition treaties have indeed been honed to the legal systems of both participating countries. And under them, the United States did ask for the release of a man who was wanted for other crimes as well. And the question is, wouldn't you, under those circumstances, want the man extradited to your country?
Yeah, it's a complicated question. We have to follow our legal system just as United States follow its legal system. That's quite normal. We appreciate it very much. We have some experience. Better to do not go in details about it, but if we understand each other very well about it. But it's question of independence of each country, and question of legal system of each country, and question of cooperation between two countries, and understanding between countries and between nations.
Given the historical record of occupation of the land, what criteria do you use for defining the PLO as freedom fighters?
PLO, Palestinian people are moving, as you know, from country to country, and they ask to establish piece of land which can stay there. Nobody allowed them to stay there. Even your view about Palestinian liberation of Palestinian people is very close to others as well. United States looking for solution for Palestinian people. It's a big problem for Middle East. If we cannot find solution for Palestinian people, if you can never reach peace there, we appreciate very much establishment of Israeli state. We explain our position to our Arab countries that is necessary to accept this reality. The reality, even late President Tito explained to Nasser that this first step which he can do is recognize Israel as independent state, but as well to ask solution for Palestinian people. Palestinian people. That's human, that's political, that's problem for all this area and all other world. That's it's our general policy to support people fighting for freedom. We have experience very much about it. We were together, United States support very much anti-colonial revolution as well, and political emancipation in Africa, Asia as well. Your view were progressive on this, all this historical process after Second World War, and rather different from colonial power, some colonial power like some states in Europe. So that's why we think recognize not only me but all other world recognize Palestinian liberation movement as liberation movement. Of course, we cannot accept any terrorist action in this. There are some groups around the national PLO terrorist group. It's another question.
The question was the apparent murder of an American by this group insufficient evidence of Mr. Abbas's guilt?
Yeah. First of all, we are very sorry because of this loss of one life of all American citizens. But people from there are 4 men in Italy, they are responsible for that. But nobody can say whether Yasser Arafat or his leadership responsible for that, because they announced several times that they condemn this terrorism as method.
The question concerns the PLO, and it was, why does the PLO assassinate or take firm measures with those who suggest reconciliation with Israel?
Yeah, I know that the United States are working very hard to improve negotiation of this problem. That's it's stand of our country and other countries just to find peaceful solution. That's could be only solution, and to establish a normal relation between states and nation on this part of the world.
But you seem to be implying that national liberation movements, quote unquote, are justified in employing terror tactics upon innocent men, women, and children throughout the world.
Yeah, Yasser Arafat and in PLO, we don't think that they are terrorist organization. They condemn terrorism they condemn.
The question is, does the ignoring of the degree of evidence which the United States did present indicate a bias in favor of the PLO and thus is not a policy of non-alignment?
Non-alignment is a movement with 120 countries. Lot of differences between them. It is not so united movement. They united about one minimum program, but there are a lot of differences from country one to another, from one to another movement. It's reality of present world. There is no way to. All countries are independent, all movements are independent, and you cannot, by force, to make anything.
The question is, what is the official government position on religion in Yugoslavia?
All religions are free in Yugoslavia. And if you go there, you shall see thousands and thousands of churches, mosques, and different churches to belong to different religions. Maybe it's enough. Another question, I can tell you that there is some groups from Albania people, they ask for more religious and human rights. But if you compare religions for Albanians in Yugoslavia and in Albania, they are in Yugoslavia totally free. Albania not. That is different. And just mentioned because there are some groups which ask support for, and they try to undermine Yugoslav policy about it.
There's a most welcome question for the ambassador.
Yes.
It was, would you elaborate on the opportunities for Americans with respect to joint ventures in Yugoslavia?
Yeah. There is no time for full explanation, but I would welcome you if you can come to my embassy. There are people working on this, some specialists who can explain you better than me about it. But generally speaking, our new provision stimulates investment from foreign partners. It's not a problem of transfer profit and not problem of which was mentioned before. What main problem? Or transfer
of technology
transfer of technology, transfer of profit.
and patent security.
Yeah, all this problem is resolved very favorable. So I can send you paper about it. And we have a lot of joint ventures with American partners, more with American partners than all other partners from the world. That's what we welcome very much.
Sir, would you comment upon what some people might describe as internal minority problems, or, as the gentleman described them, liberation movements within Yugoslavia?
And you cannot compare this question with the national liberation movement. We passed national liberation revolution, and all Yugoslav nations decide to be united in Yugoslavia. And if you go to Yugoslavia, you can find that Yugoslav states are more independent, even more independent than your state were during Jefferson's time. If I compare, I know your history, a little about your history. But we are passing this period that all our states, our nations are enjoyed very, very much all freedom. I met several questions from some people here, from Pepsi Cola. A few days ago, there was vice president discussed with me, and he has a lot of remarks why you in Yugoslavia have so independent states. So they have in 6 republics 6 plants of Pepsi Cola, and they have some difficulties. That's another problem. But I can tell you that you cannot compare our internal discussion about our equality, about our internal policy, about with any liberation movement outside.
There are 2 questions. One, would you be inclined to give any additional reasoning with respect to the non-recognition of Israel? And the second question was, do you think that Mr. Abbas would get a fair trial in the United States?
She had been talking about Irish.
Well, the analogy, well, I don't think it was misstated, but it was,
Yeah.
at least I hope it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was, she made an analogy between
Irish.
Ireland on one hand and Israel on the other, and the PLO on one hand and the IRA on the other. And the point that she was making was that you recognize Ireland, but you don't recognize Israel.
I think it is not possible to make such comparison. But I cannot say anything about trial of. I believe that there is no country in the world in which people don't believe that his legal system is very legal system who can provide a very objective trial. I believe that United States as well. I know about my country, I can say about my country.
Perhaps, Mr. Ambassador, some of the continuing references to the recognition of Israel are asking whether you could comment on what happened to be the dynamics of the foreign policy of a non-aligned country in attempting to play that particular role in international politics. Does that place any particular pressures on you to follow a policy different, of course, than that of the United States? Is there something about that non-aligned role which puts you in a position that is unsettling to many people, leading to consequences such as, indeed, the recognition of the PLO, which isn't a sovereign state, and the non-recognition of Israel.
It's, I already explained it, why we want to see peace in this part of the world. And I cannot go in details. We, as you know, we have very good economic and other relation with Israel. Our relation with Palestinian movement is really, it's not a classical diplomat relation. We just have sympathy for people without their country, which who are looking for settlement. But you cannot compare. Really, I agree with you. We cannot compare liberation movement and state. But that's reality of present situation in this part of the world. I think all people, including non-alignment movement, are trying to find solution, peaceful solution to establish peace in the world, better understanding among Israel and their neighbor, its neighbor, and among many states which are very and not even very friendly relation there. As you know, there is not two states with the same opinion there in this part of the world. That's the problem of this part of the world.
The question was whether your principles of management, which of course are a great deal of workers' influence in decision-making, are those practiced by foreign firms which set up plants in Yugoslavia, if indeed they do set up plants? And I believe your first question was whether there were any plans to export that particular managerial system. Yes.
Yeah. We would like very much to learn from your companies, especially in management, in marketing, in productivity, in organization, in improving technology. That's why we want to be very flexible, and it depends of what capital you invest there. Your participation in the decision making is according to your capital you invest there, and our provision allow it our provision are very flexible in this field.
The question is, are there Russian missiles in Yugoslavia aimed at Western Europe? And if so, how do you reconcile that with a policy of non-alignment?
You see, first of all, we have our industry, and we produce all equipment for our army. We bought some components from United States, from Russian, but it's our. We now have very good military economic cooperation with the United States, and it doesn't mean that it's if we buy missile from the United States, it belongs anybody than Yugoslavia. I don't think that we have any missile in Yugoslavia. We don't want. We are a country which are not going to attack anybody. We are ready only to oppose any pressure from outside. That's all our equipment are specifically for this purpose, for defend our territory, our country, all Yugoslavs are ready to fight for freedom if it's necessary. Our equipment is not, if I may say, offensive, but defensive. So that's, yeah, there's no, is it enough for you? I can send you to Mr. Lauder. Lauder is visited Yugoslavia a few days ago from Pentagon. We have joint meeting and discussed this problem with about military economic cooperation. He can tell you maybe more about it.
Mr. Ambassador, we thank you very much for joining us this evening. You came at a time when some of our members were concerned whether indeed you would arrive here for reasons that are clear. We're pleased by the respect you've shown us by being with us this evening. Certainly the dilemmas that your foreign policy confronts are not identical to ours, but the earnestness with which you speak, I think, of a peaceful resolution of conflict in the Middle East, as well as your eagerness to continue to cooperate with the United States economically, indicates a path that both our nations can share in spite of some differences which have been clearly identified. We thank you very much for sharing your time with us.